In this video, I want to tackle how Magnus Carlsen, the current world champion, keep defeating the very best in the world. So we have Alireza Firouzja recently at the World Rapid in Poland, but also Vladimir Kramnik, the former world champion. So in this video, we're gonna have a double header, Carlsen-Kramnik and then Carlsen-Firouzja. Let's go. In this game, Carlsen plays white against Kramnik at the World Blitz 2019 event. So they go for actually London system. Carlsen loves to play that. Bishop f4, the game continues and he goes knight bd2, but there was nothing special in the opening. So I'm gonna go very fast. I'm gonna wait for black to castle. So the game continues, and after c3, Kramnik castle. So you have a very balanced position, not much to talk about. It wasn't like a prep where Magnus won very easily. So now I want to go to the key position on move 22nd, rook b8. So why rook b8? Kramnik wants to line up the pressure against the b pawn. Obviously, Carlsen right now protects the b2. And then we have, apart from that, Kramnik having a bishop on d6 and Carlsen a knight on b3. So I would say that this position is fairly equal. If I were to run an engine, he would say it's within, pawn 2, pawn 3, not even half a pawn, right? And this is where Magnus shows his class. He's going to outplay Kramnik, a world champion, a former world champion. And let's see how he does that. So this position is nothing special. Knight c1. Now, it's hard to understand right now what Magnus is thinking, but that knight in b3 had no future. Couldn't go here or here, but then nothing to attack. So Carlsen wants to attack the king, and he's bringing the knight on c1, then on d3. Then on d3, we're going to see where the knight's going to jump. Maybe to f4, maybe to e5. And that plan, as slow as it seems, going to be very strong. So knight c1, let's get going. a5, logical. Knight g3, queen b5. And here, another key pawn. In order to weaken the king side, here, h4. And now we understand that the knight is trying to come on the king side, and then Carlsen wants to open the h5. Game continues, h5, and now what is the next plan, right? The knight on d3 is much better than when it was on b3, but now we open the h5. What is the next idea? King g2 and rook h1, and all of a sudden, white is invading on the king side. So g6, chasing the queen, king g2 played, and now, of course, Kramnik, being very strong, wants to bring the bishop on g7 to protect the king. But look at this, rook c8, rook a8, and the queen, they're very far, and they don't offer protection for the king. Queen f4 played, very strong. Now, for now, it's not going to be on the h5, but Magnus wants to target this f7 pawn. Knight e5. Now, this is a great outpost right here. Queen e8 played. Now, would you consider taking that? If you take that, then you go here, and this is almost game over. Let's say the king try to hide or escape. Then you go here, check, and you are winning. So that knight on e5 cannot be captured. The queen comes back to the rescue of the king, and here, rook d3. Excellent plan by Carlsen. He wants to attack on the f pawn. So f6 played, knight g4. The knight on g4 can now come to h6 or take f6. Game continues, rook f3, and here a3 was a bad move, and Carlsen took, f5 played to defend f6, and here queen g5. and you can see that the knight will jump. There's a pin, and the position is collapsing. So Kramnik tried to escape. Rook h1. The rook will come all the way to h7. Rook takes a3. Rook h7. Rook takes c3. And here there were several ways to finish. You could come with a queen, and you could really give a check here because of the pin. But Carlsen picks this check, and then he does a check here, and the game, Kramnik resign. Why is that? Then he will simply take, and rook g7. So the key idea in this game, right, was that knight over here became very strong and eventually made his way to e5 and g4. And of course, with h4, h5, Kramnik could not defend the king side. That was a masterclass in strategic planning by Magnus. And let's see a similar theme against Firouzja 2 years later. In a recent World Rapid played in December 2021 in Poland, of course the entire chess world wanted to have Magnus Carlsen playing white against Alireza Firouzja, 18-year-old, number 2 in the ranking, and a candidate, so potentially a future challenger for the world title. So this is the actual picture from the game, high-stake game, and Carlsen is white. Now I'm gonna go a bit faster here because we've seen an example of Magnus strategy against Kramnik, and here knight d1. Once again, the knight retreats but wants to go to e3, then g4, and e5, which is exactly the same square that Magnus used against Kramnik in a previous game. So now, with this being said, let's continue. Now the rook here is attacked. They played a few extra moves, and eventually the knight comes on g4, and it's ready to go to e5. Now, first, Carlsen is pushing to get some space advantage on the queen side, and now he's doing rook c3 with a rook lift going to g3. So that's, we can see once again, he wants to target the king. And after breaking the knight to g4 from d1, now he wants to bring a rook as well to prepare for the attack. Now, knight e5, and once again here, Firouzja did not take. What would happen if you were to take over here? You would take back, and let's say that Firouzja is waiting here. You would have rook c1 attacking the queen moves, and then you would have bishop a3 attacking the knight, and then rook c7 followed by bishop d6. So you can see that with the bishop d6 and the rook here, white has a dominant advantage. So instead here, once again, rook f6 was played, and Firouzja with black has to wait and defend. And over here did a mistake. He tried to counterattack with g5, knight g4, excellent move, going to h6, and then you have a fork. And after covering for the fork, knight e3 played, and f5. We can see that knight on f8 is very passive, and that knight on e3 is jumping. So it was crazy, right? We went from d1 to d3, e3, g4, e5, and we can see that definitely Magnus is an expert at really using the knights to create attacking chances. And here, one more time, knight g4. The knight comes back to g4, and here you have again a fork. And how do you defend the h6 pawn, where king g7 was played, but f6 plays, and now the h6 pawn is dropping. And the knight drove back, and the rest was fairly straightforward. Knight e5, look at that knight on e5, and that knight on f8. White is a pawn up, and it's a completely winning position. If you forward to the last move of the game, knight g5 play, you're attacking e6, you're threatening f7, and Firouzja resign. Why is that? Let's say you try to defend here, then you do f7 check, and let's say king h8 is the best move, knight e6, and you're completely winning. After taking, you take, and you have queen e8, f8 queen. You're completely winning here. So once again, I think that this example shows how Magnus manages against the very best in the world, Kramnik 2 years ago and Firouzja a few weeks ago, to really strategically dominate and win the games. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe if you like this content.